Hey, friend, Chris here from Logic Pro Rules, the website and channel that helps you get the most you can out of Apple's Logic Pro. Today, I want to show you a dead simple way of leveling your vocal performances so the volume and dynamics are consistent from part to part, phrase to phrase. So we're recording vocals, whether it be yourself or someone else, and obviously there's going to be variation in terms of volume and dynamic. You could be whisper quiet one moment, screaming loud the next, and anywhere in between. And when it comes time to add compression, EQ, all these processors to help your vocals sound the best, well, you're going to have a really hard time. Number one, when it comes to EQ, there's going to be so much variation. One moment your vocal might sound boomy, the next moment it sounds thin. It's really hard to pick an EQ, cut and boost that will sound good all of the time. And number two, when it comes time to pull up a compressor, well, your compressor might overreact on the loudest bits and underreact on the quietest bits. So I want to show you, again, a dead simple way to level the vocal performance ahead of time. So when you start to use compression EQ, it's going to be so much easier. Let's dig into it. On screen, I have a project that I just started to dig into the mix. So I've applied a little bit of EQ, some dynamic processing, and of course, towards the bottom here, we have the vocals. Just taking a look at the vocals right now, you can see that there's some, louder bits right here and here. Then it gets quieter. Right? The middle section is a little bit quiet as well, and then towards the end it gets louder. In fact, if we zoom in on all these bits, right, you can see this curve of loud to quiet, a little louder, quiet, so on and so forth. So let's take a listen right now and pay special attention to the vocals and just listen for these variations in terms of loudness and tone. Here we go.
Aunque tú me has echado en el abandono, aunque ya hayas matado todas mis ilusiones.
And then if we go further into the song here,
aunque ya hayas matado todas mis ilusiones, en vez de maldecirte con justo encono.
And towards the end here,
Tú me quieres dejar y yo no quiero sufrir, no, contigo me voy.
right, so there are these variations, and as soon as I try to apply some sort of compression, so I'll load the Logic compressor, and we'll go back to the beginning. We'll watch the meter here and notice how much it reacts to the louder bits.
Aunque tú me has echado en el abandono,
Then the quieter section,
en vez de maldecirte con justo encono.
right, the compressor is not reacting in any sort of consistent manner towards the vocals because the vocals aren't consistent. And even though I'm compressing here, it's not helping the vocals feel any more stable. So what I want to show you right now is a dead simple way to level these vocals. First, you need to select the vocal region that you plan on using this process with. So obviously I'll select the one vocal I have and go up to Functions. And about halfway down is an option to remove silence from audio region. Now the window that pops up may feel kind of intimidating. What exactly is going on here, right? We see all these boxes in relation to the waveform of the vocals. With this window, Logic Pro is offering you the option to cut out any bits or sections that are below a threshold, that are too quiet, and probably are not necessary, probably just ambient noise or something that is just not important to the performance. And you could set the threshold right here by dragging up or down. When I set the threshold to -4, only one part of the vocal performance is loud enough to exceed the threshold. So right about there. If I reduce the threshold, at about -80, all of these bits of the vocals, all the major parts and these noises at the end are loud enough to exceed a threshold of -80. So the idea here is that you're going to set the threshold to a point where there's a box around each major section or phrase of the vocals. So about -36, I feel pretty good. Now the other controls here, minimum time to accept a silence, allows you to tell Logic Pro, hey, wait at least, in this case, 2.1 seconds before you decide that a section is no longer part of one of these boxes. Or if I go in the other direction, you see here, don't wait any seconds, so we have lots of boxes here. So I'll leave it at 1. There's pre-attack time, so how much lead-in time should there be for each box, and post-release, how much time at the end should be held out. So I know at this view, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense what is going on here, but basically what I'm offering you is a one-shot option to split up your vocal sections without having to manually split them up, right? So I could use the marquee tool and split up these vocals as such. But this could be quite cumbersome depending on how long the vocal performance is that you have to work with. So instead, if I undo, you can use the remove silence dialog. But again, this view might feel quite overwhelming. In this case, I suggest that you at least use the marquee tool or the scissor tool and split up just a couple sections of the vocal performance. So I'll select the first region here because I've split this up from the other two sections. Control and X. That makes way more sense to me. I have a much clearer idea of what I'm chopping up. So if I reduce the minimum time to silence, okay, that's a little too choppy for me. I can reduce the pre-attack time. All right, so we have these really tight boxes with gaps, but I have a feeling I'm going to start chopping off the front edge of a word, and that's going to be a problem. So let me set it back to 1, and I'll leave the release. I'm not too worried in this case, but of course, if this doesn't work, we'll redo the process. All right, so we can take a look. That looks pretty good. Cool. I don't think I've chopped up any words. I haven't cut off the front end of any word here or the end, but now I have separate regions for each phrase. Let's repeat the process. Okay, let's see if we can reduce the tag time here. Maybe not, but I could drag on the decimal point to try to refine what's being cut here. All right, that looks pretty good to me. We're already at 0 with the release, so I can't actually adjust it in a negative direction. I can only go in a positive direction. So let's click OK. All right, looks pretty good. And the last section. All right, so we have all these different regions for each of the different lines and sections of this vocal performance. Now, why would this be of any value? Well, check it out. If I now select all of these regions and go back to functions, halfway down is an option to normalize region gain. And what I like to choose is to affect individual regions, set the algorithm to loudness, and by default, the target level will be -23 loudness units full scale. This is a great starting point. Basically, Logic Pro is going to determine the average loudness of each of these sections and adjust their volume so they all match this target loudness. Let me click Apply. All right, so there's been some variations. If I undo, redo, that's looking pretty good, right? All right, so let's now take a listen to the vocals.
Aunque tú me has echado en el abandono, aunque ya hayas matado, en vez de maldecirte con justo encono, sufro la inmensa pena de tu extravío, lágrimas negras. Tú me quieres dejar y yo no quiero.
All right, so the volume and dynamics are way more consistent across the performance here. And in fact, I could just bounce it in place. Let's just do that so it's easier to see. Look at that, way better. So now, if I apply my compression, let's take a look at the meters and hop from section to section here. Here we go.
Aunque tú me has echado en el abandono, aunque ya hayas matado todo, en vez de maldecirte con justo encono, en mis sueños te colmo y lloro sin que sepas que el llanto mío, que tú me quieres dejar y yo no quiero sufrir contigo.
Look at that. The vocal compressor is reacting in a much more consistent manner in relation to the incoming vocal audio because I've gone through the process of splitting up the vocals into different sections, and it was very easy with the remove silence function. From there, I set every one of these vocal regions, every part, to an average loudness. And it took like 2 seconds for each process, right? And now when you start to apply EQ, it's going to be way easier to figure out what you should cut and boost because you don't have these huge swings in volume and dynamic. Everything's more or less consistent. And your compression will go much further for you because it doesn't have to work so hard to try to squash the loud bits to bring up the quiet bits. It can work in a much more nuanced fashion. Now, of course, there are micro dynamics from word to word here. Some of the words kind of taper off, and we need a little extra help. One compressor isn't going to do it, but you can use serial compression from here, parallel compression, and that'll really smooth out those micro dynamics and help the vocals feel really consistent, really locked in. So I hope this video was helpful for you. By the way, next week, next Friday, I have something pretty cool going on. I'm hosting a live session of how I produced some vocals for an indie rock song. And I'm going to walk through the entire processing chain, what I use, what I tend to use about 99% of the time, why I use it. And I'm going to even provide templates and presets so you can just download them and apply them to your own songs. So I hope you join me. Check out the link in the description below. See more all about this. I'll check you for more later this week. Take care.